So what you're going to do for poly sand is you have your pavers laid. This is not a level base, so you're going to have joints that are large here. It's kind of confounding error, but whatever. You're going to take your poly sand. You're going to take the bag. You're going to dump it in an area. It's important that you don't oversweep the poly sand because then you're going to get a disproportionate amount of polymeric adhesive to sand. So you actually pour the bag in your area and you sweep it. Don't sweep more than 5 feet. If you sweep it further than that, the sand's going to carry, the glue's going to stay behind. So something to think about. I grabbed this poly because it's got a bunch of straw in it. But when you lay your poly down for the first time, make sure that there's no dew or moisture on these things because it will stick to the surface. And that's something we don't want. When you put your poly down, it's pretty much just shakes them out and you broom it across. There's actually a technique for brooming your poly. It's diagonal because you want to have it catch in all the joints. So you go across the joints like that. And then how you want your poly sitting as far as height goes is no lower than a quarter below the chamfer. The chamfer is this edged part, this miter part on the brick that keeps it from cracking and chipping, like this one. So you're going to get your poly across, sweep it all in. If you have excess, pick it up and move it. Don't sweep it. Pick it up with a shovel or something. And get rid of your excess. And then to finish it off, again, you're going to sweep it on a diagonal motion, getting that poly below the chamfer, because otherwise it'll bust out over time, just due to wear, treading. Just a light sweep, get all that, the particulate off. And then if you're sweeping along a joint like this, try to sweep in because you'll bust out that joint if you sweep out to the edge. Typically, you're going to have your edgecrete and your dirt work done before you poly so that it doesn't seep out the edge here. Because if you don't have the dirt flush with the pavers, you're going to have a good half of the paver that's exposed on the corners. Just unless you want to come back after you do dirt and reapply poly to the edge, and no one likes doing work twice. After you're done with that portion, you take a blower. It's actually a critical step so you don't get any gloss on there. And you're just gonna, sorry guys, you're just gonna run it on an idle. You're not gonna do anything fancy. Just get the surface clean. Yeah, that's pretty clean. You're gonna have to work a little harder if you're doing flagstone or textured pavers. This is a textured paver, and you see how there's still a little bit in there. You're gonna want to take a look at it. You're gonna want to work it from different angles, just making sure that you're doing all the right steps. Once you have your poly in there, you're actually gonna run the compactor over it first before you blow it with the pad. So all our plate compactors should have a pad except for the North Star. If there's not a pad with it, ask somebody. It's around. In this application, I'm just going to use a hand tamp because it's so small. You can use a hand tamp as long as you have a suitable pad. Just lightly working along the seams. On a true base, the pavers won't rock, but you can see it'll settle quite well. And then also when you have your edgecrete around it, it's going to keep it retained as well. The edgecrete, note on that is it should be wet when you're compacting, otherwise you run the risk of cracking it. So this step of compaction happens before you compact the first. Well, it's the first compaction of the pavers. You don't compact the second time on top of the pavers. That makes sense? Because you have your base that's compacted, your bedding layer that just stays nice and loose until you put the poly down, then you compact the whole surface. So then that step combined with that first compaction is the single step there. You're going to put down more poly, broom it in, get it back up to that height we were talking about, just below the miter, the chamfer it's called. You can use a big broom. I'm just using the small one just because of the size. Not going to spend forever on this because we're going to tear it right up. But again, blow off that surface. It likes me. Doesn't like me. Anyway, we'll assume, yeah, you want to see if you can get it? Bet you can. First pull. There's no gas in it. Hey! Opa! And that's why his name is Derek. So then you just wet it down. You're going to actually wet it down until you see no more soap coming out. This is what the Techniseal rep calls it. And then when that happens right there, it's usually an indication that you got a big old height difference between the two. But you're going to make sure that that sand's washed into the cracks. It's a light spray. So this is too much water pressure, so you're going to want to adjust it at the spigot, making sure that it's just a light shower. You're going to wash it. These bubbles here, that's the soap referred to as. You're going to wet it. You're going to soak it for about 20-30 seconds, the whole patio. 20-30 seconds per area. You're going to make sure that it's soaked and the water is allowed to settle. You're going to leave it, let it sit for about a minute, and then do it again. And then you might even have to do it a third time, depending. But you're going to want to make sure you don't see any soap coming through the face at all. That's an indication that it's fully saturated, because that's only coming out when the water is hitting dry polymeric adhesive. So after that, you're pretty much done. But then you're going to want to go through and touch up any joints in the day after if it's not a good poly job. Like I said, if the soil isn't around the edges, you're going to want to touch that up later, but make sure that the surface is dry, because if you put poly on wet pavers, even damp pavers, it'll stick and it's going to give you a headache. So any questions, comments right off the bat before the video stops?
Do you have to compact do you have to blow it off the first time before you compact?
No, you don't. I redacted my former statement after I forgot about the compaction with this. You don't need to compact. You don't need to blow it off before you compact. As long as
blow it off before you put water on it.
Correct. Yeah, just so it doesn't get that glassy look from the film.
I've seen people poly as they wet it down. What do you mean?
Are you sure it's the poly adhesive or is it the resin? Because there's multiple kinds of sealer, joint sealer.
I don't know.
Yeah, so this polymeric adhesive is very finicky when it comes to moisture requirements. They don't use it in the Northwest because there's so much rain. They go with a different kind of joint stabilization, whether that be resin or some kind of solvent-based material. So there's a lot of different stuff that people use, but this is by far the strongest. So that's why we use it. But it's picky when it comes to moisture, so keep that in mind.
What about the edges right here?
Yeah, so the edges, you're going to have your edgecrete halfway up the paver. Obviously, we don't have them here. The edges, ideally, you're going to have your dirt work done up to the paver, so that's going to be flush. And then the poly hits that dirt, and then it's full. Yeah, so
You want your edges full?
Yep, that's the ideal. If you can't get them perfect, you know, that's sometimes how it goes, but we do our best to make it as prim and proper as possible.